Hi everybody, we are learning to program in the Python computer language. In this exercise, we will create a simple Python application that performs some calculations and involves simple conditional statements. We will use Microsoft Visual Studio, which is freely available, but if you want, you can use any tool you judge necessary, including Visual Studio Code. In fact, you can create the following application directly on the console or terminal, whether in Microsoft Windows or Linux. Start Microsoft Visual Studio. In the Visual Studio 2022 dialog box, click Create a New Project. In the Create a New Project dialog box, select Python. In the list of projects templates, click Python Application. It should be selected already. Then click Next. Specify the project name as Payroll Evaluation 1. Set the location to anything you want. And click Create. Here is the code we will use. We start with some introductory lines, just to show the name of the application. After that, we will request some values from the user. We start the employee information. We will request a first name, followed by a last name, followed by the hourly salary. Then we request the values from the time worked. We request the value for Monday, followed by the value for Tuesday, followed by a value for Wednesday, followed by a value for Thursday, followed by a value for Friday. Then, to get the total time worked, we will add the values for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Then we start to perform the calculations. To start, we will assume that the user worked regular time. So the regular time is the same of the time worked. The overtime is firstly set to 0. The regular pay is gotten by multiplying the hourly salary by the time worked. And the overtime pay is 0. But in case the user worked over 40 hours a week, we will consider that the user worked overtime. To perform the calculations, we use an if conditional statement. In this case, we consider that the user worked over 40 hours for the week. In this case, the regular time will be set to 40. To get the overtime, we will subtract 40 from the time worked. To get the regular time, we will multiply the hourly salary by 40. To get the overtime pay, we will multiply the hourly salary by 1.5, which means the user worked time and half. We will multiply by value by the overtime, and that will give us the overtime pay. To get the net pay, we will add the regular pay to the overtime pay. The rest of the application is used to show the results, a summary of the payroll. Now we can execute the application to see the result. If you are using Microsoft Visual Studio, on the main menu, you click Debug, Start Without Debugging, and that will display a DOS window. At the request, I type the first name, press enter. I type the last name, I press enter. I type the hourly salary, and I press enter. For the time worked on Monday, I type 7 and I press enter. For Tuesday, I type 8, I press enter. For Wednesday, I type 6.5, I press enter. For Thursday, I type 8.5, I press enter. And for Friday, I type 7.5 and I press enter. And the application shows the result. To close the DOS window, if you are using Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Visual Studio, you can just press any key. To test the application with other results, if you are using Microsoft Visual Studio, you click Debug, Start Without Debugging. Once again, a DOS window comes up. I type the first name and I press enter. I type a last name and I press enter. I type the hourly salary and I press enter. For the time worked on Monday, I type 9.5 and I press enter. For Tuesday, I type 8, I press enter. For Wednesday, I type 10.5, I press enter. For Thursday, I type 9, I press enter. And for Friday, I type 10.5 and I press enter. Once again, the application shows the result. This time, we have values for the overtime. To close the DOS window, I press any key. Using an opposite conditional statement. In the previous code, we used the greater than operator. As it happens, its opposite is the less than or equal operator. We are going to test it. Change the code as follows. What we do this time is to reverse the calculations from the regular calculations to the conditional statements. For example, in the previous code, we used the greater than operator. This time we are using the less than or equal operator. So we reverse the other values. After making the change to test the code, if you are using Microsoft Visual Studio, on the main menu, you can click Debug, Start Without Debugging. When the DOS window comes up, I type a first name and I press enter. I type a last name and I press enter. I type the hourly salary and I press enter. For the time worked, I type a value for Monday as 7.5. I press enter. For Tuesday, I type 8, I press enter. For Wednesday, I type 8.5, I press enter. For Thursday, I type 6.5, and I press enter. And for Friday, I type 7, and I press enter. And the application shows the result. Notice that there is no overtime. To close the DOS window, I press any key. To test the application with other values, if you are using Microsoft Visual Studio, on the main menu, you click Debug, Start Without Debugging. On the DOS window, when requested, I type a first name and I press enter. I type a last name and I press enter. I type the hourly salary and I press enter. For the time worked, For Monday, I type 9 and I press enter. For Tuesday, I type 8.5 and I press enter. For Wednesday, I type 10.5 and I press enter. For Thursday, I type 9.5 and I press enter. And for Friday, I type 10 and I press enter. Once again, the application shows a summary of the calculations. Notice that this time we have overtime. To close the DOS window, I press any key. So that was an introduction to Python. You will find a link for the code in the description section. Thank you.